I don't care what camp you're in. You could either be in the Tyler Perry camp or the Spike Lee camp. But today, I'm going to make a argument, right? Spike Lee is a way better filmmaker than Tyler Perry will ever be. And that's the honest truth. You could debate me, you could agree or disagree with me. But in this episode, we're going to break down why Spike Lee is better than Tyler Perry. Let's jump right into it. Welcome to another episode of Media Talks TV with your host, Tony J. And I want to thank, before I jump into this discussion, I want to thank the 100th subscriber who just subscribed to the channel. Thank you. I appreciate that. Make sure you hit that like, share, and subscribe because we only going to get bigger and bigger as time goes along. You know, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with this 100 subscriber episode, but I think I wanted to continue the discussion that we had a few videos back. We did two Tyler Perry videos talking about critiquing Tyler Perry's Divorce in Black. And I know he has another movie that is coming out. I'm not at liberty to speak about that movie until we see a trailer. But, you know, how I feel about Tyler Perry, you've already known how I felt about Tyler Perry. But let's, set that aside for a minute. Let's talk about, Spike Lee for a minute, because everybody's favorite filmmaker, as far as black film is concerned in the black film industry, everything runs through Spike Lee. Now, I know Spike Lee is getting up there. He's hitting his 70s. So, Spike Lee has been around for a very long time. He has an elaborate filmography. But what I found odd, and I was really looking on Amazon Prime, and what I find troubling on these streaming devices, you don't find a lot of Spike Lee's movies streaming. That's very problematic to me, considering that Spike Lee has had a long filmography and basically everybody loves his movies. You know, I think the last time I watched Brooklyn was, I think, 5 years ago. And that was the only movie that was on Netflix at the time. And maybe for Black History Month, they had Malcolm X. They had Malcolm X on Amazon Prime, HBO Max. Probably still up there and somewhat on Tubi as well. This was on Tubi. I make this statement as to say, looking at Spike Lee's movies, I feel as though Spike Lee's movies aren't well played or put out in streaming devices the way Tyler Perry's movies have been put on streaming devices. Every streaming device that you know got a Tyler Perry movie on it. If you really think about that, you go look at it now. Got maybe one or two Tyler Perry movies, and then it's on the streaming app, BET Plus. So all his stuff is playing. They also have some of the free channels. Tyler Perry's House of Pain is in reruns on Pluto TV, and he's about to start another season of House of Pain, which I'm not gonna be able to see because I ain't got cable right now. But besides that point, when it comes to a lot of black filmmakers and a lot of black films, it seems like Tyler Perry stuff is put on every streaming platform, whereas those Spike Lee's movies, whether it be, Malcolm X, Crooklyn, and maybe He Got Game. Those are only three, and they never put Clockers on streaming devices. They haven't put Clockers on streaming devices. You could buy Clockers on Amazon Prime, but Clockers isn't even playing on regular devices, which is weird. Like it's, you know, and you're definitely not gonna see Jungle Fever, which is weird. Like I don't see Jungle Fever being played on there. I see Do the Right Thing most of the time. Do the Right Thing is on streaming devices. But it's only about a small number of Spike Lee's movies being put on streaming devices, and then after that, it's like you got to search long and hard to find DVDs and rare collections. I had a Criterion collection of um, Jungle Fever, Crooklyn, He Got Game, and Clockers. So that was the Criterion collection, but that was under Universal. So I had the Criterion collection. Somebody destroyed it. Shit. But when I was younger, I brought the Criterion collection from the mall. And I said, these are four of my favorite Spike Lee movies, you know. And that begs the question, you know, why do I say Spike Lee is a better filmmaker than Tyler Perry? And it goes all the way back to writing. Okay. Before you could pick up a camera, and even I was in school and I understood I took basic screenwriting courses when I was at in college, and one of my professors said before you could pick up a camera, you got to pick up a pen. And that was the most profound thing my professor ever said to me. You got to be a good writer before you could become a great filmmaker. And Spike Lee comes from a class of black folks that went to school, got an education, and perfected their craft as they went along. They had the skills and the tools to become a better filmmaker. And that's one of the things that's most important about being a filmmaker. when I talk about Tyler Perry's writing, I talk about it in the sense that he doesn't have the skill set the way a lot of other filmmakers have it because he's coming from the streets. Spike Lee's coming from the classroom. And those are two different schools of thought. Whether you believe it or not, filmmaking is a very technical field. And you got to learn the ins and outs of how to write and produce film. And Spike Lee comes from this world where, you had to go to film school in order to become a great filmmaker. Now, I'm not saying everybody got to go to school to get a degree in filmmaking, right? But what makes him a very interesting person, because I read a lot about Spike Lee's background. His mother and his father were really into the art, so it was kind of bred into him. He was into photography. His mother was into photography. And what was so interesting about Spike's upbringing, that the fact that he was from Fort Greene, Brooklyn. Fort Greene and everybody that comes out of that camp, because it's a wealthy area, you know. It's like, okay, you're surrounded by art. I mean, imagine growing up in a community where you have walkable access to the Metropolitan Art Center, the Brooklyn Museum of Art, like everything around Spike Lee was like he comes from that world of art. So it kind of ties into why his films are always kind of, you know, he takes thought process when he does a film. Now, I'm not saying every film was great, but when you look at Spike Lee's films, it doesn't have the same thought process. He has his signature cinematography, but at the same time, the way that he writes movies comes off as being more authentic than Tyler Perry's movies. Tyler Perry's movies don't come off as authentic. They come off with the same formula. And I know a lot of you have discussed that with me, saying that, well, it comes off with the same formula, he reinvents the wheel. And Spike Lee does that sometimes, but he always takes a different route. Now, one of the films that I hated the most with Spike Lee was probably Chirac. He could have did better on Chirac. I will give you that. Chirac was really kind of, it had its up moments, its down. His heart was in the movie. He conveyed a message, but it wasn't the literary metaphor wasn't really fitting with what the real issue was that was going on in Chicago. I felt like he had a missed opportunity in that respect, with the whole Lysistrata thing. And that's another thing that I admire about Spike Lee, is that he uses literary models to try and, show off what would be in a film, or how you could apply that to daily life. You know, he appeals to Spike Lee appeals to different intellects too. One of the things that he does with his films is he doesn't get people to come to, he doesn't make you come to a conclusion. He lets you come to the conclusion yourself. He doesn't insult the audience, but they understand what goes on in his films. And most of his films sometimes they kind of lead you down this way where there isn't a path. And then once you get there, it's like, okay, you were paying attention the whole time to the story, but you didn't piece together and try to figure it out for yourself. And Spike's not somebody that's going to tell you how to feel about that movie. You're going to have to come up with your own conclusions. So he gets the audience to actually engage with the film and think. Whereas though in other films, with Tyler Perry films, it's the same thing. Like every ending, it ends with them going to church or going down the aisle. Every film has that. Every film has that. Spike Lee's films, they don't really give you the route. He doesn't give you the map to figure it out, to find your way at the end. He gives you the the tools, and then after that, you're gonna have to figure your way out of that movie or out of that plot line. And that's very showing. Like when I watch Clockers, like Clockers, for example, the very big part of the overarching theme of that movie was about trains. If you really watch that movie again, you'll see that everything in that movie is about trains. What is a pathway? A pathway out of the projects and out of the cycle of violence. And then as Strike leaves, there's still more violence in the projects. But he was able to get put on a train out of those out of that world because he was looking for a pathway out because he was stuck. And then his influence started to bleed into the younger guy that saw him on the corner. So then you see the cycle of the violence continue as he moves on with his life. So it's you he gives you like Spike is one of those people, he gives you the pathway and then everything kind of works itself out at the end. Same thing with Jungle Fever too. And the weird thing about Jungle Fever, a lot of people slept on Jungle Fever. It wasn't just it wasn't just a movie about falling in love. And Spike will want you to think that way, that it was about two people falling in love, but it was about two people being intertwined into different worlds, you know, and being afraid because they knew that they couldn't be together, you know. So it was like, okay, he was curious. Flipper was curious about going into this world of Bensonhurst. They're both from New York City, but they barely ever go enter and eat into each other's world. But they go to she goes to his neighborhood, and you see all the racial hostility. So Spike Lee was always good with that environment. Like he would set the tone, but it was also other things about his movies that I like, and especially with Malcolm X. Like when you look at Malcolm X, there's a certain tone in Malcolm X, right? Like he doesn't just give you the story of Malcolm, he takes you through the experience of being Malcolm because that was one of the longest films I had ever sat through. It's about 300 minutes. This is the longest film ever. I don't know how he was able to write that film, but he did a damn good job doing it. But the way that he broke down Malcolm X is that they broke it into three phases, and then they gave you the backstory of how he got where he got. But what really told the story very well was the lighting, and nobody really talks about that. Uh, when you look at the film, and I would want you to look at the film again as well. It's on, is I believe it's still on Tubi. But if you look at the film, the beginning portions, maybe 30 minutes in, the light is bright and it's much more of a bright hue. And then when he's in jail, it has a cold blue hue, or it's this red. I started seeing a lot of red hue by the time he got to like Harlem. And I don't know how he did that, but the way that the light was bouncing off the camera, because he used a 35 centimeter, 35 to 75 uh millimeter camera. And in those days, the Panaflex, you had to have some real money to use them Panaflex cameras. That's the thing that people don't understand. Like with Spike, it took a lot of work ethic to put Malcolm X together, to piece it together. And what I read from it was a book that I read about the making of Malcolm X. He had to use the 35, 35s, the 75 millimeter cameras. And he had to fuse those clips together to widen the screen because you know, the two normal cameras, like he had a Panaflex on it. If you don't know what a Panaflex camera looks like, you need to look that up because it's real heavy technology. It's not nothing to play with. Let me just put it that way. A Panaflex camera is one of the most expensive cameras during during that time. And the film had to be in canisters. And he comes like Spike comes from that camp of the celluloid film where you had to manually edit, linear edit your film. There was no uh there was no Final Cut back in 1992. You had to go to college in order to become a filmmaker. And Spike had to put in a work ethic and the sweat equity to get those large feature films. So he had to do small films before he could graduate to the feature films. But the problem also back then was there was a lack of distribution pipelines for certain films. Hollywood wasn't about to give him major money for those large films. So after he did Malcolm X and he ran out of money, the celebrities like Oprah and Michael Jordan and all of them, they had to give him money just to continue shooting the film, which is crazy. Nowadays, it don't take much to make a film. You had two cameras, you could shoot it and upload it to YouTube in like 5 minutes. And that's the world we coming from. But with Malcolm X, you had to have the technicality down, especially. But it's the lighting that really made that movie, the emotion of the movie real good because he was able to convey that in the film and then change up the light, and then you started to notice that the light started shifting from red to blue, and the once he got to jail, then it was a cold hue, and then once he got out, it was a lot more lighter, which was interesting how they changed the environment and the feeling of the movie to progress it as he ages or he evolves into people who we now know as. And that was what was so interesting about that film. Now, the Bamboozled one was one of my favorites. And like I said, with Spike comes from NYU. You're coming from NYU, you're getting your hands on the equipment and the technicality. And this is one of the things about Spike Lee that I always admired about him is the fact that he could make he could go from major films to making small films. There was never a time when Tyler Perry had to go from making big films back down to small films and still win over an audience. But that's what Spike Lee did. So when we got to the 2000s, Spike Lee was okay with shooting film on DV cams. When the DV cams came out, he had to have this big budget where he had to have $300 million or 200,000 to shoot a film. He had a $10,000 budget. He had a $10,000 budget. He got several mini DV cams from Sony and shot Bamboozle, and it was a good film. But it was the most underrated film he had ever wrote because it was with New Line Cinema. And when you talk about big distribution companies, and this is the thing that you know when Tyler Perry came into the fray, he didn't have to beg people to get distribution deals. He automatically got his distribution deal with Lionsgate. Whereas though Spike Lee had to go through many distribution deals. One minute he had a distribution deal with Columbia, next minute it was Universal, and then it was New Line Cinema. Then was so he was meandering between Universal and Columbia Pictures and New Line Cinema to get his films out into the theaters, which is crazy. And then Warner Brothers gave that was one of his bigger distribution bill deals, but he was able to win the bid for Malcolm X because it was the Norman Jewison film at first that was going to be directed, but he put his bid in and he won, which was crazy. But besides that point, Spike Lee shows the ability to learn how to evolve with the changing times. You know, unlike a lot of other filmmakers, and that evolvement, he doesn't just write black movies, he writes all types of movies. He directs all types of films, produces all types of films. But the Tyler Perry movie, you're just gonna get, same old church shit, basically. Same old plot lines. Same old things. Like, as much as I like Spike Lee, I come from the Spike Lee camp or the John Singleton camp. I don't do Tyler Perry that much. He's good certain places and certain angles, and just as much as I critique his work, I will critique Spike Lee's work sometimes. Only thing with Spike Lee is sometimes he can miss the mark due to generational differences. But it's those generational differences that really make us admire Spike Lee because he was able to break through and tell those stories. Because before Spike Lee, it was nothing but black exploitation films. Wasn't a lot of black directors and black filmmakers back then. It was white guys directing those films. And maybe to a certain extent, Dorville Martin, Gordon Parks are the only guys we knew before Spike Lee that was actually directing good films. And then I guess you could say Charles Burnett as well. Charles Burnett. But that was before Spike Lee had ever existed, you know. But I just think in my true belief that it is important that when you're studying film that you're able to know how to write. Like I had a professor who was doing an intro to screenwriting. And the one thing he taught me how to do a log line. He taught me how to do plots, how to write out what I was going to do in my film before I even put pen to paper to write the screenplay. So I would walk around. He would say, he would come into class. He say, "You want to be a writer? And don't give me no bullshit." And the one thing he taught me was when you're writing a scene, you got to put it on a flashcard. You got to put all your scenes on flashcards. So that way, when you're writing a film, you know how to put a screenplay together. Then you get a director of photography to put your vision together, and then you get a director to direct the actors. Spike Lee had all of that. He knows how to follow structure. He's worked on his craft. Whereas though Tyler Perry has not had enough time to even work on his craft of being a better filmmaker because he's coming from the world of stage. And stage does not translate over to film the way film is made. You could translate filmmaking over to stage, but stage is different from being a filmmaker because there's a lot more technicality to it. Whereas though when you're going from film to stage, there's not much technicality in it. It's like, you just tell the actors where to go, what to say, you set up the scene, and then, you know, you're kind of on a time constraint when it comes to theater. Whereas though when you're going from film, you might could add something there, or you might could shoot an extra scene and then cut it out. So you have all these options to afforded to you as a filmmaker because the real magic takes place in the cutting room and not while you're filming, you know. And I think if Tyler Perry were able to just work on that, maybe go back to school and take some courses, or maybe better yet, get, you know, more writers. I think his craft would be much more polished than Spike Lee's craft. But me personally, I always put Spike Lee over Tyler Perry, and then somebody, John Singleton would be right behind him because they both came from the camp of film school. And if you want to be a good filmmaker, you definitely like the thing that film school teaches is you got to watch movies in order to become very good filmmakers and be critics of films. And that's wasn't one of the most enjoyable parts about being taking a film course or a film class while you're in university. You know, that's all I wanted to say. Spike's just a better filmmaker, man. What can I say? But this has been another episode of Media Talks TV. I'm your host, Tony J. Thank you for subscribing to Media Talks. Thank you for 100 subscribers. Again, hit that like bell, click that share, do whatever you got to do to make this video go out. We're going to keep growing. Peace out.